So I hopped into my car and I go to stop it. The front brakes are making all sorts of noise, and I see the rotors have a bit of gouging in them, and I wonder what it is. So I ask my mechanics, I say, hey, come on over. Can you take a look at this? This is what you get when you try to get chickens to do your work for you. But they're game. They take a peek, and this is what they let me know. My front brakes are trash. So if you want to tackle this yourself, basics you're going to need. This right here is for loosening up the lug nuts on the tires. That's for your locking lugs if you got them. This right here is for loosening up the caliper bolts. You're going to need something to compress those calipers when you go to put new pads in. Two different types here. I'm going to show you how each of them work. The C-clamp if you don't have yourself an actual caliper compressing tool, and then how to use a caliper compressing tool if you got it. Now for parts. You want to get yourself a set of pads that reflects your desire to maintain the vehicle. I like cheap brake pads because I like cheap things. But you can put on whatever you want as far as cost goes. I think these Duralast work just fine, and I like the price. I went with Duralast for the rotors as well. I usually just change out the rotors every time I'm doing the front brake pads on this thing, just because they're cheap. It's hard to find somebody that turns rotors anymore, so I just pick these up and pop them on. They're very tiny and they're very affordable. So let's get started. Before I jack up the car, I like to get all the lug nuts a little loose, just because it makes life a little easier once that tire's in the air. And now it's time to jack it up. You've got this location here. That's where you want to put the jack if you're trying to get a front tire off. And then there is a location towards the back of the car if you're trying to get the back tire off. But we are working on the front today, so that's just to show you where the back jack location is. You want to make sure your brake is on. Can't stress that enough. It's important. You don't want the car rolling away while you're jacking it in the air. And all you need is just enough to free it up, just like that. Don't take it any higher than you have to, because it's really unnecessary. I've always found it easiest if you keep the lugs right with the tire. They're harder to lose that way. Now you're going to want to get that wheel turned to the left like that, so that caliper's sticking out where you can get to it. Now you can see it nice and easy. You know what you're looking at. You can see the bolts you have to get to. And you got two of them. There's one here, and there's one there. That's it. You get your ratchet or wrench on them, break them loose. They should be tight. And once you get them freed up, you should be able to loosen them up by hand and pull them out. They are different from top to bottom, so take a look at them as you pull them out. One looks like this, the other one does not look like that. You want to make sure you put them back where you found them, so they're not the same. Remember that. Next step is to actually remove the caliper. Just lift it up. Sometimes you have to use varying degrees of force to get off. That one there was pretty easy. Once that's off, your rotor is just going to slide right off like that. If not, sometimes a couple cracks with a hammer will do it, but there's our problem. That right there is not what you want a rotor to look like. The inside looks decent, outside does not. The first pad I'm going to remove is the outer pad, the one that's attached to the caliper. It's got spring clips on it. I just bend them out since that pad is trash. I really don't care if I'm ruining that little metal spring. They tend to stick in there pretty good, so this one I had to pry out. The little rubber boot that I'm reinstalling there, those fall off a lot. They are very important. Do not lose them. They keep dirt and dust and grime off of that bolt that holds the caliper to the caliper mounting bracket. So this right here is a super cooked brake pad. If You notice there's very little braking material left on there. You can see the bare steel of the pad. That's what was rubbing up against the rotor. Now for the inner brake pad, it's right there. It stays attached to the caliper mounting bracket. Most of the time, a little wiggle like that will get it out. That's all you need. As you can see, that one was pretty close to gone, but that would be a good distance to change them in. Don't let them go as far as I did. That was a bad decision. So, now that you got your old ones off, you are halfway through the process of changing out brakes on one side of your car. You give everything a look over. The little channel that the inner brake pad sits in is right where I'm jamming my finger into there. If that's a little funky, you're going to want to clean that out. Scrape it out with a screwdriver or pocket knife. That brake needs to slide in there as the calipers push it tight. Then once that's all done, you're going to start reinstalling some new goodies. These are pretty simple. Just slide it in on the bottom like that. Slip in on the top. You're gonna make sure the rounded side is faced out. Or don't do that. You're gonna wanna make sure that the wear surface, the stuff that actually does the braking, is gonna be facing away from the inside of the fender well, and that's gonna be facing towards the rotor. You're gonna want that contacting the rotor as you set the rotor on. And that's it. That's one pad done. Rotor set on there. That's just a slip-on item. It doesn't get bolted down. Next step is you're gonna want to compress that caliper. That caliper is extended out from previously squishing those pads together as they wore out. So you need to return it back to being compressed. You're gonna want to do this slowly and very gently. As I'm turning that in there, you're just kind of using a little bit of light hand pressure. You never want to have to force a caliper back into being compressed. That piston that's in there, just kind of gently squeeze it back in. Never rush it. It can do damage. So take your time in doing this. Once that piston is flush back with the caliper housing, that's it. That's when you know you're done. Just start turning that C-clamp out of there. And then on the other side of the car, we're going to use the brake caliper compression tool so you can see the differences between the two tools. You want to grab your other brake pad for this side of the car. They are not side specific, so you just want an outer brake pad. It's the one with the spring clip on it. There you go, the new one compared to the old one. You can see there's quite a bit of difference in the meat of the stopping material that's on there. These slip on. That spring clip slides up the side of the caliper, spring to the outside, pad to the inside. You gotta press them up and in there, they click in. Once it's sitting flush to the inside of the caliper, you know you've installed it the right way. Now, all you're gonna do is pick up that caliper, slip it down and over the rotor into the position it was in when you first removed it. You'll know when you're there because you can slide these pins in. They're going to slide through those rubber boots and then right into the holes that they had been in previously. Just like that right there. You'll start turning them in, hand tighten them as best you can. Now let's take a look, see what things look like. Hopefully, what you're doing looks like this. You got a rotor, you got a couple new pads, everything's back the way you found it. Tighten these bolts down, and then we're going to start stomping on that brake pedal and pushing that caliper out. You're going to hop in that cab, just start letting your foot rest against that pedal, and you're going to feel that pedal drift all the way down to the floor. And you're pushing fluid from the reservoir down to that caliper. You're going to do that until you start to feel some resistance. That's it. Pistons back where you want it. You can straighten out that steering wheel. Make sure that rotor's facing straight forward. Time to put the tire on. And ta-da! Driver's side is done. Let's move over to side number 2, passenger side. Same deal as far as jack point goes. There is a cutout down there. That's where you're going to want to put the jack to get it off the ground. Break those lug nuts loose before you get it in the air. You'll thank yourself for that in a minute, because much easier to do when the car's on the ground. Same as the other side, turn that wheel so that caliper's sticking out. It's easier to get to, easier to work on. Break those nuts loose. This side here, for some reason I just couldn't get it done by hand. It's always helpful to have a piece of pipe around so you can loosen stuff up like that. And this was a mistake. Don't pull that bolt out until after you've broken the bottom one loose. Because what you're gonna see here is there's nothing holding the top of that caliper in. So I should have left that bolt in, and I did not. So hopefully this helps you from making the same mistake I did. So same as the other side. These bolts are different from top to bottom. The bottom was longer, has little rubber bumpers of some sort on it. I don't know what they're, some sort of dampening maybe, I'm not sure. But remember to put them back the way you found them. Pull that caliper and start pulling your pads.
There we go.
This inner pad was pretty stiff in the little channels that hold it. So I took a little bit extra time in this one to kind of clean it up. There was all sorts of brake dust and rust and funk in there, so you don't want it to stick that hard. So if it's a little funky in there, clean it up. So here we are. We're halfway done the passenger side. Time to start putting in some new goodies. So you've got 2 pads just like the other side. One for the outside, one for the inside. The outer pads here have that spring clip on them. They're the ones that attach to the caliper. The ones that do not have the spring clip are the ones that attach to the caliper mounting bracket right there. This is what you want it to look like after you've installed it. Facing that direction, sitting in the channels just like that. This here is a brake caliper compression tool. going to serve the same function as the C-clamp. It's just specifically meant to do this, where a C-clamp is not really meant to do what I was doing with it, but it does work just as well. You're going to put it in there. You're going to make sure that you've got the end that's pressing right in the center of that piston, and you're going to turn it in nice and slow. You're looking to return that piston back to home. Get it flush with the face of that caliper there. That's all you're looking to do. Do it slowly. And the handle coming off of this, not intentional. It's broke, so I'm gonna have to fix that. So let me go get a tool. So we've hit the chicken intermission. And while we're here, I'd say if you're liking this video and you're finding it useful, hit that like button. And maybe you've watched a couple of my videos and you're enjoying them, send a subscribe my way. I'd appreciate that. So you're just gonna take this brake pad, lift those spring clips up just a little bit. Try not to drop it on the ground. Slide that up onto the caliper. Once it's slid up all the way, it's gonna snap in. That's it. It's ready to go back on the car. Now they're hand threaded in, we're gonna tighten these up. And then that caliper's back on. Next step after this is just getting that caliper compressed back up by pressing on the brake pedal. You can see it happening right there. Give it a quick look over. Make sure those boots are where they're supposed to be. Everything's tightened down where it's supposed to be. Straighten that wheel out. Make sure that rotor's facing forward. Pop that tire back on. We're almost done. All right, now we're down to the last bit. You want to head over to your brake reservoir. You want to make sure all your fluid levels are good, because you did kind of push some fluid around in there. Pop that cap, make sure everything's full, and then that's it. That's all you got to do if you want to change out your front brakes. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a good one.